Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to a Kepler Roundtable. I'm Joffre Swait. I'm a Spanish teacher at Kepler, as well as being the family and student academic advisor. And I'm here today with Mr. Ahern and Mr. Griffiths, Joseph and Ryan. And we're going to talk about games and education. Games in the classroom, games at home. Really, this is just an excuse for us to talk about games. Welcome, guys. Oh, you guys need to unmute.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have to say, like, normally I wouldn't call a guest out for failing to unmute, but I feel like in these COVID times, we should all be experts by now, Joseph.
Yeah.
Well, welcome in. Like I said, we want to talk about games. We've got a couple of chess club people already watching and commenting in chat. Marshall Leary says hello to the other chess people. So let's talk about chess club at Kepler. Before we just tackle this broader subject of games, you all are both mentors with the Kepler Chess Club.
Yes, we meet once a week. Actually, kind of right after this live stream, we'll be meeting at 3 p.m. Pacific. That's the time we meet every week. We do a little instruction in the first half of the meeting, and then we spend time playing each other in chess.
And it's been really great getting to know people, their chess strategy as well as their personalities too. We've been going at this for a couple weeks now, so starting to get to know people by name, and we're having a fun time over in chess club. So yeah, if nobody hasn't joined yet, get a hold of us if it sounds interesting to you. Okay,
cool. Yeah. So, I mean, with chess club, what's obviously one of the biggest reasons to participate in any extracurricular club, any school club, is the social aspect, right? So there's a social aspect to chess club, which is part of the fun. That kind of put aside, why do people join chess club? What's awesome about chess club?
I think the main thing is that chess is fun, but it also helps us develop our minds. And so it doesn't feel like time wasted either. Like, we're developing our minds and having fun at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a real difference between playing a computer or an app on your phone and playing an actual other human being, especially when it's somebody that you play regularly, like we do in chess club, because you start to pick up not just on, the technically correct strategy that the computer would toss out if you were playing against a computer, but everybody plays their own sort of style. So you sort of pick up on, I guess you could say, the psychology of the player too in the game. So yeah, that's another advantage of having that group.
Right. But there are puzzles and there are intellectual exercises that are games that you can do, even just outside of chess. But when you play against humans, it makes all the difference. I know that when I play chess against a computer that's set to a very low level, it's still very difficult for me to win because I just can't care enough. And that probably just shows maybe there's a lack of chess passion. But like when there's someone sitting across the table from me, or I know there's a human on the other side of the screen, I perk up, I pay attention. And in fact, like Joseph talked about personality, you start to see people's personalities emerge. I think Ryan actually said that. Joseph brought up a couple of things that I think we could use to kind of move into the broader conversation. You mentioned a couple of things. One was, you said the chess club is not a waste of time. Right. So I think we could really just kind of dive, are our games a waste of time? Because the other thing you said is that chess club exercises your mind. Now, I don't want to be super utilitarian about this, but we are talking about game for this conversation, games pedagogically. Right. So, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about games, about the use of time, about what it can do for your mind. What kind of games do you guys play at home? Like when you're just having fun, I want to play a game. What kind of games do you guys like?
Well, it depends on how many people are available to play. I mean, I really, besides chess, I really like word games like Boggle and strategy games like Settlers of Catan, stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm not going to list everything because I don't get to play them too often.
Yeah.
But those are games I like, and a lot of them it takes some intellectual ability to play them at a decent level, and if you do, I think it is more fun also when you play it at a decent level, when you're sort of competitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most of the games that I play for fun in my free time, they're usually board games, tabletop games, and they're usually combining strategy as well as chance. I'm not a big fan of games like recently I was playing with some family, and we had some board game that was just a big stack of like random miscellaneous facts, and you draw a card and you ask the question, and maybe you get it right and maybe you get it wrong. But after you play the game 3 or 4 times, that gets kind of old and the game wears out. I like games that have sort of that infinite combination of things that can happen in them. Like Monopoly is a fun game that I really like.
Right.
Or I also like backgammon, because I think backgammon's a good game where there's chance involved, but there's also strategy involved.
Yeah, and managing chance, I think, is, managing chance, managing percentages is one of the most interesting aspects of a lot of games. And that's one of those aspects that translates to real life very easily. Like if you've become accustomed to, I'm going to make a play, I'm going to make a decision, and it may not work out, but I know it's the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's just real life. But I definitely get the whole, I can't stand games that are only chance. Like on a very basic level, I've refused to ever play Chutes and Ladders with my kids. You run through these. The kids feel like I'm playing a game. It's a real game. I'm going through this course, but there actually is no decision making. Stuff just happens to you, and that's just too fatalist for me. I can't deal.
Yeah, I can relate to that. You definitely want to feel that you have a sort of, that you're doing something in the game, that something's not being done to you. Otherwise, you're just kind of like in the driver's seat of it. I mean, in the passenger seat, and the game's over and you go, oh, I guess that was fun. It's more interesting, and I think you're more invested in it when it's a game like backgammon, where sure, you're having to roll dice, but you're also having to do other things like decide if you want to do priming or build a wall to block your opponent off, or if you want to rush to the other end of the board, different things like that.
Right. And even playing the personality of if you know the person across from you, playing their personality is an important part of gaming, and it's an important part of life. But so I'm curious to hear from you guys how you use games as teachers. Right? So Ryan, you are a humanities teacher, and Joseph is a science teacher. I think that's perfect. Right. So we've got like what a lot of people like to hold out as sort of extremes of education, sort of polar opposites, which of course they're not. Right. But we have a humanities mind and a science mind, and you guys are both in chess club. You both love games. Do you use games in the classroom? And if so, how? And games can be anything, right? Games is a pretty broad category. We could talk about simulations, but anyway, I will leave that with you guys. How do you use games in the classroom, if at all?
Yeah, I don't use them that often, but today actually I did. I used a solar system simulation, and we were putting in different masses and initial velocities and initial positions for like the stars and the planets, and seeing how the orbits turned out. And everyone had a lot of fun with that, but it also built intuition about how gravity works and how orbits work.
Is intuition important for someone in your field?
I think that maybe what I mean is just like getting a sense of understanding. If you want to get an idea what's going to happen without actually doing the calculation, it's important to have that so that you know if something is worth pursuing or not. So yes, I would say it is important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As a language teacher, I do use games, but there's a for in learning language and in creating situations where people can use the language. Obviously, you're creating scenarios, you're creating simulations. So there's actually a pretty blurry line between activities and games, right? There's and I think that it can be pretty easy as a teacher to, fall in love with having fun as opposed to, we need to learn the subject. But as a language teacher, it's important to have simulations and activities. But for me, as a game lover, I like to actually incorporate board games. For example, one of the most common games I use is this solitaire game that some Canadian in the 70s devised, and I found in a thrift store. And it's just you roll a die, and you have to manage the results. The waves are coming to smash your sandcastle, and you're trying to build a sandcastle. But so the game has nothing to do with Spanish or whatever language is being learned, but you have to kind of learn these rote commands, because I don't let the players touch the board. I do everything, but I respond to what they tell me to do. So move this wave, put this piece on the castle, and so the students are having to actually play the game, but in another language. And that's something that is unique to being a language teacher. How about you, Ryan?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. What you were saying just there kind of feeds into what I was talking about, or what I was thinking about talking about from the perspective of a literature teacher, because I was thinking that a good game is like a good book. It takes you a while to get into it. There's unique language to each game, or even jargon that you have to kind of learn and pick up on through experience, because I've had this experience. I don't know about you guys, but you get a new board game or any new sort of game, and you have a group of friends or maybe a family member. You sit around and you open it up and you kind of glance at the instructions and give it, that cursory read through, and then you say, well, we'll figure it out as we play, as we go along. And it's more fun that way, because you're kind of learning as you go. You don't have to take 25 minutes to read through the rules and say, okay, does everybody got it? Everybody understand? You just kind of wing it until you pick it up from habit. And you learn, like in Monopoly, what different things. Monopoly is a good example because it's a complex game, and there's a lot of different things to learn about, like mortgages and buying hotels, buying houses. So once you kind of get sucked into the game, and the best way to do that is to play with friends or family who, maybe you have a vested interest in wanting to beat at a game. You pick up on the language that the game's using. You pick up on the rules. You start to develop strategies, and all that happens, I would say, almost intuitively. And again, it varies depending on who you're playing with. So I guess from the humanities perspective, that's how I'm approaching the value of games in teaching. It's really about the interaction there between the different players, learning who thinks what, who plays more cautiously. If you're playing some sort of card game, who likes to go all out and take the risks? What are the advantages or disadvantages of both of those strategies?
Yeah. I love that you said winging it, because it makes me think of both my experience as an athletic coach and as a teacher. And I think that when you're learning to play a sport well, it depends on the sport, but it's a real danger to overtrain.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big believer in both basketball and rugby, which I've coached, in playing as much as possible. You have to drill and you have to learn skills, but you can't spend every practice just learning those skills. You actually have to try to get the ball into the key, to beat your man, to make the pass outside, to actually, you have to see an opponent try to stop you from doing it. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not enough just to practice ball handling and passing. And, but it's a difficult, it actually is a bit of a tight wire act as a teacher. The fake it till you make it, wing it, you learn on the fly. But I do try to, in teaching, I try to put the students out there where they have to start figuring it out and start doing stuff. And if I err, I prefer to err on that side. And I know that's a personal sort of preference. But if I had to choose between preparation and action, I would choose action as the best learning tool. Realizing that, of course, that's, it's a false choice. There's sort of a tight wire that you walk there. You need both. But I wonder how you guys interact with that idea in your classrooms.
Well, I think it's an issue of the best way to spend recreational time in the classroom, or even just in life. What sort of games or entertainment are you spending your time with? Because there's different classes of games or entertainment. There's more passive forms of entertainment where maybe you'll watch a movie and you enjoy the movie and you learn things from it, but you're not really active. You're not creating anything while you're doing that. You're receiving the entertainment. Games are more of that sort of active type of entertainment where you're doing something, and as you're doing something, you're learning. You're learning what works and what doesn't work. And yeah, I like your point about how you can do drills all the time, but eventually, you can drill forever and try to reach that, point of perfection. But especially if you're somebody who's a bit of a perfectionist or you want to be really competitive, you might not ever feel like you're going to reach that point until you just go for it.
Yeah. And actually, I think going for it is the solution to perfectionism.
And it's not just do it because, we don't want to give Nike credit for anything.
Right. Let's not do that.
Just go for it.
I think it's important in games as well as in class to always analyze the results afterwards. And so, for example, on a quiz, if you get 100, you might think, oh, I got everything right. I don't need to look at the questions again. If you get one wrong, you'll be like, what did I get wrong? Why did I think that? And you might actually remember it better than if you had guessed right. In a game, you can analyze the game afterwards, maybe with the help of somebody else who knows the game better, and you or them, whoever, can try to come to a conclusion about when was the turning point in the game, what decision could have been made differently so that it wouldn't have been a loss. Or even if it's a win, you can still do that, but you might not learn as much from a win as you can from a loss.
Right. Yes. And if the game is more complex, even with a win, it bears examination. A straight quiz, getting an A in a quiz and getting an A in an essay helps you in different ways. And if you actually, if you had to write out an essay or write out an explanation of something, then, there are going to be notes and there's going to be feedback. And I decided to emphasize this, how could that have gone differently? What benefit did it bring me? And that's the sort of complexity that games can bring as well. So I think a natural place to go from here is to talk about problem solving. Richard Stevens comments that no plan survives contact with the opposition. And I think that was kind of, riffing off of the, you got to actually play basketball, not just practice ball handling. But yeah, so I think that games are a good way to actually encounter or gaming things, right? So you had a solar system simulation that you had students do today. So actually running the thing and then seeing what unfolds from that is useful in itself.
Right. Yeah, we didn't do calculations beforehand. We could have, but that would have not been as fun,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we have a question from Marshall Leary who asks, and this is very game specific, but does anyone have a 3D printer to make a board game? Now, I actually happen to know, I know Richard Stevens, and I think he does. Either that or he's planning on buying one. But have any of us nerded out to that point? I haven't.
I have not.
Haven't had a 3D printer to make a board game, but there's been a couple times where me and some friends have set about to make a card game on our own, like a, kind of a Pokemon ripoff. Really, it was just an excuse to draw fun things, and my friend liked coming up with rules for what all the different cards did. So we would go through phases where we'd try to get this game launched, and we'd have some friends over to test run it, and it ran pretty well, but really it wasn't, I'd have to say objectively, it wasn't the most original game. It was just taking things from other games that we had played and that we'd liked, and incorporating elements into it.
Okay. So, for teachers watching this, are we advising them to gamify their classrooms a little more? What are the benefits and the disadvantages of using games, simulations, scenarios in the classroom?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because really I was thinking earlier when we were talking, and an important point that I would bring up is, if you're a teacher and you're going to teach using games, use the games to a purpose and make sure it's for a good purpose. I've had a lot of experience as a substitute teacher in different public schools. I've been in a lot of different classrooms, and usually when the sub's there, they have a game. They're not doing any sort of serious activity because they want to be there for themselves when they're doing that. So I've gotten a chance to see these different types of games that get set up, and a lot of them, I would say, aren't really being set up for educational purposes or good purposes. There's one which is kind of funny, and is the sub you like, called Silent Ball, where you have everybody in the class sit on the desk and toss a ball back and forth, and they're silent the whole time. And if you make a noise or if you drop the ball, you have to sit down, get off your desk and sit down, and you're out of the game. And that's the sort of last resort game if you're substitute teaching in a second grade class or a first grade class, and you got 23 students talking over each other, and perhaps you've lost all control of the classroom. It's okay, let's play Silent Ball. And it works, everybody's silent, but it's not really the best use of time either.
The objective of a game like that is to gain control of the classroom. It's not to actually teach.
Yes, exactly. And there's other games like, I know a lot of teachers use things like Kahoot and quizzes, the different online games. I'm not sure really how I feel about them too much. I've seen them used well, but then I've also seen it's basically just the semester's test in a Kahoot form. Right. And you might as well have had a study guide at that point. I'm not sure. That's really just, dressing on top of homework. It's not really a game. It's just trying to maybe gamify the room, like you said, without too much of a purpose other than hopefully you're keeping students' attention with flashy colors and music on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think something like that can be used legitimately when you would have broken the classroom up into teams and drilled. Yeah. We're just going to memorize stuff. We're going to drill. We might as well have a fun little computer screen to help us with that. But, it's not, we're not playing a game really. We are memorizing this stuff.
Mm-hmm. How do you guys feel about that? Have either of you used, because I go back and forth on it, like Kahoot. Quizzes seems more fun because the students unlock different things, like they can dock points from other kids in the classroom. They can freeze other kids from answering questions, and they get like bonus points and things like that. But it's kind of essentially the same game.
I haven't done that quizzes one, the second one you mentioned. I have done Kahoot a couple of times with my astronomy lab group. We've been sort of testing it out for a conference we're preparing for the end of this month, and I thought it was a lot of fun doing Kahoot. It's basically just like trivia, though, and you're in competition with the other people. So as long as the questions are at the right level, it can be beneficial. If the teacher makes the questions too hard, nobody's going to learn from that. Nobody's going to even enjoy it. But if they're also too easy, then you're not really trying. Your mind isn't exercising at all. So there has to be the right balance there in the level of questions. And I would also say the right balance in what portion of the class is games, because there also needs to be substance content to the instruction, but we also don't want it to be boring. So balance.
Yeah, because I've used Quizlet a little bit. Actually, this was a few years ago. I generally find that they're more trouble than they're worth. It's good to have a fun classroom and have students be engaged, but like Joseph said, you have to sort of manage the percentage of that. That is legitimately important. But it may be that I find them not worth the trouble more often than not, because I am comfortable running such activities and running a fun classroom. Right. So, and some teachers maybe aren't quite as comfortable with keeping the direction going in a good place, right? So we are actually learning here. This is class, even though we're having fun. I feel very comfortable in that, but not every teacher does, right? So maybe if I were if I had a different personality, I might actually look at a tool like that as being more useful, because that's what it is. It's effectively a quizzing tool, a drilling tool. But this percentage thing that Joseph brings up, like, I don't think you even said percentage, but you need to consider when you're bringing fun into the classroom, how much fun has been had, right? Like, because we have work to do, and so I have two roles at Kepler. I'm a teacher, but I'm also the academic advisor, and I run Kepler Life, which Chess Club is a part of. And so all the extracurricular stuff falls under Kepler Life. So I had an experience this week that really made me stop and think, because I set up for this Saturday a group, kind of like a field day, but for an online educational platform. I set up a video game for just a family-friendly video game for the students to come play, and I'll be there. And, it's like a field day or a field trip, right? We're going out to do this thing, right? So we're going to go play this video game, and I'll be running the game, and we'll all play, and yay, lots of fun. And it's pure fun. It has nothing to do with me being a teacher. It's just Kepler Life. We're going to have some fun. So one of my Spanish students messaged me and said, "Hey, did you set this up?" I said, "Yep." He says, "Well, you're a hip teacher." I think he said hip. "You're a hip teacher." And I thought, oh no. What impression have I created? Because the previous Spanish recitation that we had done had been, we went through 3 little board book level Spanish things for little kids, and then the class broke up into groups, and they wrote their own little board books in Spanish. And it was a very fun day. And the students were all saying, "Hey, we had so much fun making these books." So all this fun was had in Spanish class. Then in a separate role, I set up this video game, and one of my Spanish students says, "You're hip." Like, do I still have authority in my classroom at this point? That really created an existential crisis for me. So I'd be curious to hear about your experiences in managing your classrooms, in managing your courses and the trajectory of them. Have you had experiences like that? Maybe you get as hip as me. That's probably what it is.
Well, I think you saying that kind of puts me in mind of it is kind of, like you said, a matter of the teacher's personality, because I think that students pick up on pretty easily when there's a teacher who's trying to be hip, as opposed to somebody who is hip, like yourself, apparently, right?
Apparently.
So,
yeah. Okay, we're not friends. We're not friends.
But no, yeah, it's a matter of personality. If you're a teacher who likes to utilize games and likes to have the class to have a higher entertainment ratio, I guess you could say, than maybe other teachers would like it to have, then that works, as long as it's genuine and as long as it's you. But if you're somebody who's trying to force it because you've been told that, students need to have fun every once in a while, and you're trying a little too hard, I've seen that work out as well. And it usually, again, this is more from my experience, things I've observed as a substitute teacher than things I've observed in my own class. But it usually leads to this sort of authoritarian sort of teacher being really serious about something that's not all that serious. Like, you tried to have the fun, but your personality is still more strict, and it's kind of falling apart. And the class is just kind of shaking their head at that point, and the teacher's trying to be really rigid with the rules of something that's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, I think that's such an important comment, because games, as you've already suggested, teachers can use games as classroom management tools, as a way to maintain control over the students. But you have to reflect your personality. You have to be thinking about your class, right? Like I am a loud, fun-loving person, right? So that might be reflected in my class a little more. But so many, and we are on a platform where people are choosing their courses. And so many teachers are beloved not because they're fun, but because they're interesting, right? Like, I'm talking about this thing and you can tell I'm passionate about it, even though I haven't cracked a smile in 4 months. And that's making you passionate about this too, right? And so, for teachers watching this, if you're a good teacher and you see that, things are going well, you don't want to artificially just start injecting, like today is Tuesday, today's the day for fun. That can just get weird.
Or the opposite, right? If you're kind of a fun-loving teacher and you start worrying about losing control of your class, walking in one day and suddenly being Professor Snape from Harry Potter, it isn't going to work out very well, because the students are going to wonder if you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, if you didn't have your cup of coffee or whatever.
Yeah. So I'd be really curious to explore age groups. I don't think any of us have worked very much with younger students. I've homeschooled, my younger kids. I've worked primarily with professionals, adults. Joseph, I have the idea that you might have worked mostly with undergrad university students. Is that true?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does that
high school the past few years also high schoolers too?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what has that been like? How does that interact? Like, do you use activities, games, etc., with your college kids? You talked about the simulation a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that, well, I guess with college kids, I've taught astronomy lab here at the University of Idaho a couple of years, and part of it is communicating the knowledge in an exciting way so that the students they learn, but they also look up to me, sort of like I'm not too much older than them. So sometimes I feel like an older brother to my students, but I also need to maintain like the authority of the teacher. So I think, and also sort of like without being too much of like a friend. So trying to balance that. I feel like I've been wandering away. I don't even remember what the question was now.
Well, there's no real question. I was just interested in knowing how different age groups in your experience might interact with games in the classroom. I mean, so with high schoolers, you're significantly older than them. I mean, from most people's perspective. I think I'm the oldest in this crew at age 42. But yeah, that must have changed the dynamics for you and opened up different possibilities.
Yeah, I think with college students, I probably don't have as much of a game element in the classes, in the labs. It's more like this is the objective and how to get there. I still try to convey that enthusiasm so that they care about it too. But with high school also, I know that this, because I was impacted a lot by some of my high school teachers. The kids, they don't have a major already picked out yet. They could go many different ways. So they also need to learn life lessons. And so part of my classes, like I'll go off on tangents more often in high school if I think it's going to be a valuable life lesson for the students, and trying to impact them at the place they're at. It's a really important time in their lives.
Yeah, that's interesting. Most of my experience with adults, first of all, it's impacted, my teaching experience has impacted how much I use games. I use games a lot because most of my teaching was one-on-one for a year or two with one person, right? So you're meeting a couple of times a week with the same person for 2 years. And it's someone with a master's degree from some German university or someone with a doctorate. And like at a certain point, you have to be injecting variety, right? And so that made me think, I have all these games lying around. I should be using them. And so that's actually shaped how much I do use games a lot in my teaching. And of course, with language, it kind of lends itself to that. But that's actually how my education shaped me. And I actually find myself now with Kepler, I am trying to learn how not to treat my students like adults. Right? That's the skill, which is the opposite of most teachers. Right? I'm having to remember that a 13-year-old is not a grown-up, and make the due adjustments. So obviously our teaching experience shapes us. Ryan, like what sort of different age groups have you interacted with?
I've mostly taught undergraduate, college students, and high school students. I've been substitute teaching mostly for about 6 years or so. And substitute teaching, I've been at all different age ranges. So I've been in the kindergarten classrooms, and one thing that occurred to me while we were talking was that, it depends on what we define as a game, because in the past I've been a tutor for students, maybe 9 or 10 years old, who needed extra help in reading. And it was an issue of not drifting off while you were reading, staying focused on what's in front of you. And we sort of made a game out of it, because one of the things that the teachers were wanting was for them to be able to read a whole passage in a certain amount of time, like a minute, 2 minutes, or whatever. And so I would toss it out, say, hey, I bet you that I can't read all this in 30 seconds. And they'd say, oh, no way. I said, all right, Tommy. And then I'd do it. And then I'd say, okay, now you try, you do it. So you sort of make a game out of staying focused on reading, and it's no longer just, a boring activity that they aren't thinking about. It's a game that they want to try to beat the speed that I can read at, or catch up to the speed that I can read at. And we go back and forth, and it's fun like that.
Yeah. And so games and gamifying ultimately are a tool, right? And we pull out certain teaching tools situationally. So you're one-on-one with a 9-year-old, that's going to ratchet up the likelihood that you're going to pull some game, or you're going to gamify the activity because of where you are. It's not a classroom of 9-year-olds. It's one, and it's not one 18-year-old, right? It's one 9-year-old. So the fact that you're in that position is you're gonna make the decision as a professional about the best way to approach certain things.
Well, as opposed to your freshman composition course, which is all 18-year-olds, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I can tell by the look on their faces that they just kind of want to sit there and hear the lecture and answer questions and be a little bit more serious. I'm not going to try to throw a crazy game on them at 8 in the morning. So yeah, it's definitely dependent on the age range, and being able to, I guess, read the room and know who's going to be interested in it and who's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would have been absolutely fascinating if we had a kindergarten teacher in here as well. I think that was a missed opportunity.
Well, my mom was a kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
And it's funny because she's retired now, but I would often hear her complain that a bunch of the newer teachers were too fun-loving, I guess you could say. She'll walk into another classroom and come home and say, so-and-so has no control over a classroom. It's like a madhouse. And, people would request my mom as a teacher for their kids if they knew that their kids needed a little bit more structure. So it was kind of a trade-off there. Like, she was the teacher that they knew would be the more disciplined one. They'd have games and stuff, but there would be more order and control in that room, as opposed to, she calls them the newer wave of teachers who are more, let's just have a great big recess all day.
Right.
Yeah. My mom was also a teacher for preschool and kindergarten for the last 15 years. She passed away a couple of years ago, but when she started her career, she was a speech therapist, and she would have kids, like small groups, 3 or 4, play games with them. That's what she would do during the day. She just needed to get them to talk so that she could help them with their speech. And games were the best way to do that too. So
Yeah, actually, I had to do speech therapy as a kid, and I remember that it was all games all the time, but it was hard work. It was really hard work, and I have a special love for speech therapists because of it.
Well,
So,
I was in speech therapy as well, and we did not get any games.
Oh, that's too bad. I had an S problem when I was 4 or 5, but my mom corrected it really quick. I never had to like even go to speech therapy, just like in the house. Yeah.
actually, so my mother has passed away too, and it has since occurred to me to ask her, and I'm gonna have to wait until I see her in heaven to ask this. But so I couldn't say THs. I had an unusual upbringing. I'm a semi-native English speaker. I spoke fluent English, but I ended up going to an American school in Brazil in 5th grade and discovered there that I didn't know how to make the TH sound. My brother and I had to sit we did like 2 months of drilling and games to learn how to do the TH sound. And now I want to ask, why didn't you just make me say the TH sound? Anywho, yeah. So as we draw to a close, if anyone watching has any questions about games, and they can be very specific questions, that would be absolutely fine. We have a question here from Richard. Would a unit, and this was asked a little while ago, but would a unit of living history roleplay be considered a game in this sense? And at this point, I don't remember what the sense was, but talking about teaching. A unit of living history role play, is that a game?
I actually did some as a student in college. We did something similar to that. I can't remember what the name of the series of books was that the teacher was using, but it was designed to talk about argument and persuasive speaking and things like that. And the historical sequence that was set up in the class was the trial of Anne Hutchinson back in colonial America, whether or not she should be kicked out of the village or whatever. And this is real person. This was around Salem, Massachusetts times. I don't think it was directly connected, but it was about, the classroom took sides and we took on these different personas. I was John Winthrop, who was, I think, I'm fuzzy on the details now, but the governor of the town. And we debated whether or not she should be kicked out because I think she was teaching something heretical, or at least heretical in the sense of what the town believed. But yeah, a lot of the students really got into it, and it actually kind of triggered my interest in Puritanism, and I studied a lot more about that, and I was really interested in it from just this class, from having to imbibe that personality of John Winthrop and make my case sort of acting out being him. So yeah, the acting out of historical sequences, it was really fun and also instructive.
Yeah, so let's close with a little leaving a message for teachers, and I'll go first, which will make it easier for me. I wouldn't be surprised if I just take the one that you guys would have taken, but a bit of advice about games in the classroom. And for me, it would be to remember the trajectory of your course, right? Are you bringing in an activity? Are you gamifying your classroom because you don't have anything to do, or because you're tired, or is it because you actually have goals that you're trying to get to, and this is a good tool to get there? And make sure that if you're going to bring this sort of thing in as a teacher, that's why you're doing it. You're not doing it so the students will like you more, or because for what the myriad of reasons I just mentioned before, but because you're on a trajectory.
Yeah, so I guess I would say that it's good to include games, but it has to be done with a balance. Also, just taking the big picture into account and like where these students are going. Like I know in my class, in my astronomy class, in my physics class, most of my students will probably not become astrophysicists, but yeah, maybe one of them will. But either way, no matter what path in life they choose, is there something they can learn from the class, and and it's easier to remember things perhaps if it's fun in the form of a game, There are other things memorable too. It doesn't have to be a game, but they can help.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. That's a good way of putting it. Just making sure that you have a purpose for introducing games into the class, making sure it's the right purpose. I had a consumer ed teacher who really just didn't want to be there, and she had us play the game of life for like 3 weeks in a row. And that's distantly related to consumer economics, consumer ed. But it would have been, a more instructive class if she just probably lectured or talked. So yeah, definitely having a purpose behind it, making it be the right purpose. And yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, students will give you a day off sometimes, but to do something like that, not only were you bored by the game of life, surely after a period or two, but you were less interested in the class.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You respected the teacher less. You were less interested in the class. You would have been more engaged and ultimately had more fun if it had just been 3 weeks of lectures.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, hey, this has been a lot of fun. I guess we gamified Kepler Lives. Thank you. You guys stay on the line. We can chat a little bit after we say goodbye. But thanks to everyone who watched so long. And if you are a Kepler student or a Kepler parent, make sure you find out what's going on in Kepler Life. Feel free to email me. There are a lot of activities. We have film club. We have Spanish club. We have chess club. We have student council. And just we're always talking to each other and really building up a community and a student life on an online platform. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.